The Last Call. The story begins not with flashing cameras, red carpets, or high-end fashion runways, but with a trembling hand gripping a phone. On a quiet night in downtown Los Angeles, a young man sat alone in his apartment. He hadn't heard from his girlfriend all day, which was unusual. She was always busy, her schedule filled with photo shoots, castings, and endless events. But no matter how hectic things got, she always made time to call him. That day, she hadn't. And when his phone finally buzzed around 11:30 p.m., instead of her cheerful voice asking him if he'd eaten, what he heard was something he would never forget. It was a voicemail. He pressed play, expecting the familiar warm tone of her laughter, maybe her teasing him about forgetting dinner again. But instead, what came through was muffled breathing, then a panicked whisper. "They're following me. Please, if something happens, remember this wasn't an accident." And then the line cut off. That voicemail, those terrifying last words, would become the center of one of the most haunting mysteries in Hollywood. A mystery that begins with a glamorous life, but ends in darkness, betrayal, and unanswered questions. But before we unravel what happened to her that night, before we step into the whirlwind of fame and secrets she lived in, let me ask you this. If you were the one who received that voicemail, your loved one's last words, what would you do? Would you go straight to the police? Would you believe them? Or would you wonder, were they paranoid? Backhand index pointing right if you love true crime mysteries filled with twists, suspense, and real-life terror. Make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications right now, because we dive into these dark, unbelievable stories every single time. Now, let's rewind. The beginning of the spotlight. Her name was Isabella Raines. By 24, Isabella had become one of the most recognized faces in the modeling world. She had the kind of look that agencies described as otherworldly, sharp cheekbones, piercing green eyes, and a presence that dominated every camera lens. But Isabella wasn't just a model, she was a rising star. Fashion blogs called her the next Kate Moss, and Hollywood insiders whispered about movie roles already lined up for her. On Instagram, millions followed her every move, from luxury hotel balconies in Paris, to behind-the-scenes glimpses of fashion shoots in New York. Her life, from the outside, looked perfect. But perfection, as we know, is often an illusion. Because behind the glossy magazine covers, Isabella was struggling with something far darker than anyone could imagine. The cracks in the glass. Close friends later described Isabella as someone with two sides. The public saw the glowing, untouchable supermodel. But behind closed doors, Isabella confided to her boyfriend, her best friend, and even her manager, that she felt watched. Not just by paparazzi. Not just by obsessive fans. But by someone specific. Weeks before her death, she told her boyfriend, "It's not random. I know when someone's just starstruck, and when someone's tracking me. This is different." She said it started small. At first, she'd noticed the same black SUV parked outside her gym. Then the same man appearing in the background of multiple events, even private ones. At first, she laughed it off. Models had stalkers all the time, right? It was just part of the job. But soon, laughter turned into fear. Because whoever it was, they weren't just following her. They were getting closer. The night everything changed. October 12, 2019. That night, Isabella was scheduled to attend a high-profile charity gala in Beverly Hills. She arrived in a silver gown that had fashion journalists raving. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted her name, and Isabella smiled, as she always did, though those closest to her said she looked tired, almost uneasy. Around midnight, after the event wrapped up, Isabella left with a few friends. They grabbed a late dinner at a rooftop lounge, where she seemed relaxed, joking, sipping champagne. But when she excused herself around 2 a.m. to head home alone, everything shifted. Security footage from that night shows Isabella walking toward her car in the underground parking garage. She checks her phone, looks over her shoulder, then picks up her pace. And then, the footage cuts off. Not because of tampering, but because that corner of the garage had no cameras. 30 minutes later, her boyfriend's phone buzzed with that voicemail. Her voice. Shaking. Terrified. They're following me. This wasn't an accident. The discovery. By 6 a.m., Isabella was found. Her car had crashed into a concrete divider on the outskirts of downtown LA. The police report initially called it a tragic accident. They said she was likely tired, maybe distracted, maybe even under the influence. But those who knew her, the ones who had heard the voicemail, knew better. Because the voicemail wasn't the only strange thing. When investigators arrived, they found that her phone was missing. Not smashed. Not damaged from the crash. Gone. And Isabella's purse, with her ID, cards, and personal items, was gone too. It looked less like an accident, and more like someone had wanted to erase what happened in the last hour of her life. Suspicion and silence. The voicemail was eventually handed over to police, but strangely, it was never released publicly. Even stranger, in the official reports, there was no mention of the missing phone or purse. Everything was filed under single car accident. But friends and family pushed back. Her boyfriend told anyone who would listen. You didn't hear her voice. She was scared. This wasn't just a crash. And Isabella's best friend, who had been with her earlier that night, claimed Isabella had leaned in close and whispered, "If anything happens tonight, don't believe what they say." Those words, combined with the voicemail, turned this tragedy into a haunting mystery. Because if Isabella was right, if this wasn't an accident, then the question became, who was following her? And what did she know that made her a target? As investigators began to dig into Isabella's final days, they discovered something that made the case even darker. Isabella had been keeping a secret diary. And inside those pages were names, powerful names. People she believed were connected not just to her stalker, but to something much bigger. And that discovery? That was only the beginning. Backhand index pointing right, stay with me, because we'll uncover what Isabella wrote in her diary, the chilling patterns in her last weeks, and the powerful people who may have wanted her silenced. The Diary of Shadows. When detectives searched Isabella's apartment after the crash, they expected to find the usual belongings of a model, designer clothes, stacks of magazines with her face on the cover, PR packages spilling across the floor. They found all of that. But tucked away in a drawer beneath her bed, hidden inside a box of scarves, was something they didn't expect. A black leather diary. On the front, in her looping handwriting, she had written one word. Truth. It wasn't a daily journal. It wasn't filled with simple entries about work or random thoughts. Every page was a record. Observations. Times. Places. Descriptions of people. It read less like the diary of a young woman, and more like a case file. The entries. One of the earliest entries was dated 6 months before her death. March 3, 2019. Saw him again. The man from the SUV. He was waiting across the street after my gym session. He pretends to look at his phone, but every time I move, his reflection shifts in the glass. I told him. He says I'm paranoid. But I know what I saw. Another, a few weeks later. March 22nd. Woke up 3 a.m. Thought I heard something outside my balcony. Curtain moved but door was locked. No one believed me. I took a photo of footprints below in the dirt. Deleted later, I was scared. And then, more disturbing entries began to appear. Names. Initials. She described them as people who were close to the industry, men and women who attended the same after-parties, sat at the same elite tables, mingled with the same producers and directors. April 10th. I think they're using him to get to me. At the club tonight, I saw the SUV again. Same man. But this time, when I went inside, I was introduced to someone powerful. He smiled at me like he already knew me. They're connected. I'm sure of it. The deeper investigators read, the more they realized, Isabella believed her stalker wasn't a lone, obsessed fan. She believed he was working for someone. A life under watch. In the last 3 months of her life, Isabella's diary turned darker. The handwriting became more frantic. Whole entries were written in capital letters. July 6th, they are inside. My apartment feels wrong when I come home. Things moved. Makeup missing. Told security, they shrugged. August 14th, car followed me for 20 minutes. Blacked out windows. Same SUV. Same man. September 2nd. If I disappear, remember this wasn't an accident. That phrase, the same words she left on the voicemail, appeared again and again. Almost like she was preparing for her own ending. And yet, she kept going to events. She kept smiling for the cameras. She kept walking the runways. Because in the world Isabella lived in, image was everything. Fear wasn't marketable. But in private, she began to confide in those closest to her. The confession to a friend. Her best friend, Natalie, later gave a chilling interview. She said that 2 weeks before Isabella's death, Isabella came over late at night, shaking, clutching her phone. She said she had received a series of anonymous texts. They said, "Stop asking questions. Stop writing. Or we'll stop you." Natalie told her to go to the police. Isabella just shook her head and said, "You don't understand. The police won't help. They're part of this." Natalie thought Isabella was spiraling, maybe paranoid from the pressure of fame. But when she read the texts herself, her blood ran cold. Because the sender had attached a photo. A photo of Isabella. Taken from outside her apartment window. Powerful names. By September, Isabella's diary mentioned not just one, but several powerful names. Some were people she had worked with in the modeling industry. Others were wealthy businessmen and investors who regularly funded fashion shows and events. She described overhearing conversations that weren't meant for her. Words about girls, parties, control. She wrote that she feared what she had accidentally walked in on. And chillingly, she ended one entry with this line. "I think they're silencing people. If I go next, you'll know why." The investigation stalls. When investigators first came across the diary, it should have blown the case open. But strangely, it didn't. The official report claimed the diary was inconclusive and did not provide evidence of immediate danger. To the public, Isabella's death remained an accident. But to those who had read her words, it was obvious, Isabella believed she was being hunted. And the voicemail, her final call, was proof she was right. The boyfriend's obsession. Meanwhile, Isabella's boyfriend became consumed by the case. He stopped working, stopped socializing. He spent every day digging into her old texts, contacts, and notes. He even tried to track the black SUV himself. In an interview months later, he broke down crying, saying, "She left me the voicemail because she wanted me to know. She wanted someone to carry this on. And I won't stop until I know who did this." But chasing the truth came at a cost. Friends noticed strange cars outside his own apartment. His phone began glitching. He said files would vanish overnight. Someone, it seemed, didn't want him to keep digging. Now, pause for a moment. Think about this. Isabella wasn't just famous, she was protected, surrounded by security, constantly photographed. If she could disappear under such suspicious circumstances, what does that mean for the rest of us who don't live under the spotlight? Backhand index pointing right. If stories like this make you stop and think twice about what's really happening behind closed doors, drop a comment below with the word truth. I want to see how many of you believe her death was no accident. The final entry. The last page of Isabella's diary was dated October 10th, just 2 days before her death. The handwriting was shaky, almost unreadable, as though she had written it in a rush. It said, "I saw him again tonight. Same eyes. He smiled at me like he already knows what's coming. If I don't make it past this week, remember me. remember what I said. This was never an accident. 2 days later, Isabella would be dead. And her voicemail, the one left at 11:30 p.m., would become the only surviving echo of her final fear. But here's the part that nobody expected. Weeks after her death, someone broke into Isabella's apartment. And the diary vanished. When the news broke that Isabella's diary had been stolen, her family and friends demanded answers. How could the single most important piece of evidence just disappear? Who had the power to make that happen? And more importantly, what secrets inside those pages were dangerous enough to erase? Backhand index pointing right next, we'll follow the investigation into the stolen diary, the shadowy figures who surfaced in the aftermath, and the terrifying discovery that Isabella may not have been the only one silenced. The stolen truth. The break-in. 2 weeks after Isabella's death, her apartment, already sealed and logged as evidence, was broken into. No forced entry. No signs of struggle. Whoever it was, they knew exactly what they were looking for. When police arrived, only one item was missing. The diary. Not the jewelry. Not the electronics. Not the expensive handbags that lined her closet. Just the diary. To Isabella's family and friends, this confirmed their worst fears. She had written about powerful people, about dangerous secrets, and now, those words were gone. The silence of authorities. When reporters pressed investigators about the theft, their responses were strangely dismissive. They claimed there was no evidence the diary had been relevant to her death. They said accidents happen, and that people shouldn't get lost in conspiracy theories. But behind the scenes, whispers grew louder. Her boyfriend told journalists, "I saw the diary. I read her words. She was terrified of people with influence. And now it's gone. Don't tell me that's coincidence." Even more disturbing, when he requested to see the police inventory log of what was taken from the apartment, he was denied access. A second victim? In December, just 2 months after Isabella's death, another young model in New York was found dead under mysterious circumstances. Her name was Lena Hart, 22 years old, rising fast in the same circles Isabella had moved in. Her official cause of death was ruled as an overdose. But friends insisted Lena didn't drink heavily, didn't use drugs. What chilled them even more was that, weeks before her death, Lena had posted a cryptic Instagram story. It said, "Funny how people go quiet when they start asking the wrong questions." She deleted it an hour later. But not before several followers screenshotted it. When her death hit the news, Isabella's boyfriend immediately connected the dots. He believed Lena had known something linked to the same people Isabella had written about. Patterns in the shadows. The more he dug, the more disturbing connections he found. Both Isabella and Lena had attended the same high-profile fashion parties. Both had worked with the same casting director. Both had been seen leaving events in the company of wealthy older men whose names never made the tabloids. And both had spoken privately about being watched. It was no longer just about one tragic accident. It was beginning to look like a pattern. The whistleblower. In early 2020, an anonymous email was sent to a journalist who had been covering Isabella's story. The sender claimed to be a former security guard at one of the modeling agencies both Isabella and Lena had worked for. The email read, "These girls weren't paranoid. We were told to look the other way when certain men came around. They had access, they had money, and they had power. Isabella kept notes. She wasn't supposed to. Now she's gone. And the diary is in the wrong hands." The journalist tried to follow up, but the email address was deleted within 24 hours. The diary resurfaces. And then, months later, something unbelievable happened. A copy of Isabella's diary appeared online. Not the original, just scanned images of about a dozen pages. They were posted anonymously on a forum dedicated to unsolved mysteries. The pages contained names. Some blurred, some blacked out, but a few clear. Names of men with millions of dollars, connections to Hollywood, even ties to politics. The post went viral, but within hours it was deleted. The account that posted it was banned. And every re-upload vanished almost instantly. Almost as if someone was actively scrubbing it from the internet. The boyfriend's descent. By this point, Isabella's boyfriend had become obsessed. Friends described him as a man unraveling, pale, withdrawn, glued to his computer. He claimed he was being followed now, too. He said his emails were hacked, his apartment broken into. One night, in a late-night live stream watched by only a few hundred people, he made a chilling statement. If they could silence Isabella, if they could silence Lena, what do you think happens to me if I keep talking? The stream cut off 5 minutes later. He didn't log on again for weeks. Now let me ask you this, if Isabella's diary really named names, if her words connected powerful people to her death, would you want to know them, even if it put you at risk? Backhand index pointing right, hit the like button if you believe the truth should never be buried, no matter how dangerous it is. And drop a comment with the word justice if you want those names revealed. The chilling connection. But here's where the story takes its darkest turn yet. Because as journalists tried to investigate Isabella and Lena's cases, they discovered a third name. Another model. Another sudden death. This time in Europe. And once again, the same SUV, the same shadowy man, had been spotted by witnesses in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. It was no longer a coincidence. It was a pattern of silencing. By now, Isabella's story had gone far beyond one voicemail. It had become a terrifying glimpse into a hidden world, one where beauty, money, and fame masked something sinister. And as Isabella's family pushed harder for justice, someone unexpected stepped into the spotlight. A person who claimed to have been part of the very network Isabella feared. And what they revealed turned everything upside down. Backhand index pointing right, stand on, because we'll uncover the whistleblower who risked everything to speak out, the shocking evidence they revealed, and how Isabella's final voicemail connected to something much bigger than anyone imagined. The whistleblower. The unexpected source. By early 2020, the case of Isabella Raines had grown cold in the official sense. Police insisted it was an accident. Reporters who tried to cover it found doors slammed in their faces. Isabella's diary was gone, the leaked pages had been scrubbed, and those who asked too many questions began to fall silent. But just when the world started to move on, a new voice cut through the noise. It wasn't a journalist. It wasn't Isabella's boyfriend. It wasn't even another model. It was a man named Daniel Cross. The confession. Daniel was not a household name. He wasn't famous, glamorous, or even recognizable in the fashion world. He worked quietly behind the scenes as a security consultant for high-profile events, fashion shows, film premieres, and industry galas. In March of 2020, Daniel agreed to an off-the-record meeting with a reporter who had been chasing Isabella's story since the beginning. What he told her was so shocking that she recorded it, fearing that without evidence, nobody would ever believe her. Daniel admitted that he had worked directly for the people Isabella had written about. His job wasn't just keeping models safe from the public. It was making sure the wrong people didn't talk. He said, "The SUV she kept seeing? That was real. The man she described? Real. He wasn't obsessed with her, he was tracking her. And I know because I was in the room when they told him to." The network. According to Daniel, Isabella had accidentally stumbled into something bigger than herself, a network of powerful individuals who used the fashion industry as a hunting ground. Models weren't just working contracts. They were being groomed, passed around, silenced if they resisted. And Isabella, with her sharp intuition and her diary, had connected the dots too quickly. Daniel said, she was supposed to be the next big face of the industry. They couldn't risk her talking. They wanted her scared. They wanted her quiet. And when she wouldn't stop writing, they decided to erase her. The evidence. Daniel didn't just talk. He brought proof. He handed over encrypted files, emails, security logs, access lists from the very events Isabella had attended. Many of the names matched the blurred entries in the diary scans. powerful executives, financiers, and celebrities. Even more damning, Daniel had footage from an internal camera at one of the agencies. It showed the same black SUV that had followed Isabella. But here's the twist: the vehicle was registered to a security firm employed by the agency itself. This meant Isabella wasn't being stalked by some rogue stranger. She was being watched by the very system she thought would protect her. The threats. When the journalist tried to verify Daniel's claims, strange things started happening. Her car was vandalized. Her emails were hacked. She received anonymous phone calls at odd hours, where the line would stay silent for 30 seconds before cutting out. Daniel himself vanished weeks later. He missed a scheduled interview. His apartment was found empty. His phone disconnected. His friends claimed he had been terrified in his final days, telling them, "I know too much. I've gone too far." Nobody has seen him since. The connection to Isabella's voicemail. But the most chilling revelation came when the journalist compared Daniel's files to Isabella's final voicemail. In one of the logs, dated the night of October 12, 2019, the night Isabella died, there was a line item for subject tracking confirmed. The subject listed was Isabella Rains. The timestamp? 11:18 p.m. Just 12 minutes before she left that voicemail. "They're following me, this wasn't an accident." Her words were not just fear. They were fact. The boyfriend's fury. When Isabella's boyfriend learned about Daniel's files, he tried to go public. He sent copies to blogs, forums, even attempted to leak them on social media. But every post was deleted within hours. His accounts were banned. In one desperate video message he uploaded to a small site, he shouted into the camera, "They killed her. They killed Lena. And now they're erasing the evidence. If anything happens to me, know this: Isabella's voicemail was real. She was telling the truth." Days later, that video disappeared too. Let me pause right here. Think about the weight of that voicemail. Isabella used her final moments not to say goodbye, but to leave a warning. Backhand index pointing right. If you believe her voice should never be forgotten, share this story with someone you know. Let Isabella's words echo louder than the silence they tried to bury her in. The spiral of fear. By summer of 2020, whispers of Isabella's story spread quietly through online communities. Forums, podcasts, independent journalists, everyone wanted to know the same thing. If Isabella had uncovered a network powerful enough to erase diaries, silence journalists, and disappear whistleblowers, what else had they erased? And most haunting of all, was Isabella the first to be silenced? Or just the most famous? Now, we'll follow the trail even deeper. We'll uncover other disappearances linked to the same circle, the chilling coincidences that tie them together, and how Isabella's death might have been just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Next is where everything begins to unravel, and where the shadows surrounding Isabella reveal their darkest secrets. The pattern of silence. A bigger picture emerges. After the disappearance of whistleblower Daniel Cross, many believed Isabella's story would fade into obscurity. But the opposite happened. Independent investigators, internet sleuths, and even a few brave journalists began digging deeper. And what they uncovered suggested that Isabella's death was part of a pattern. The European case. In Paris, 2018, just 1 year before Isabella's crash, a young model named Camille Durand was found dead in her apartment. Cause of death? Suicide by overdose. But her friends swore she was clean, healthy, and had no history of depression. More disturbingly, Camille had confided to her roommate that she believed she was being followed. She had even taken a photo of a black SUV parked outside her flat for 3 nights in a row. Her roommate found the photo after her death. But when she tried to give it to police, her laptop was stolen during a random burglary. Sound familiar? The London case. In London, 2017, another rising star, Amelia Keane, vanished after leaving a high-profile industry party. Witnesses saw her get into a chauffeured car that was not arranged by her agency. She was never seen again. Her case barely made the headlines. But leaked emails from her manager showed Amelia had sent him a cryptic warning days before she disappeared. "If something happens to me, don't believe the press." The exact same phrase Isabella had written in her diary. The pattern is clear. By 2020, independent researchers had compiled at least 7 cases across the US and Europe involving models, actresses, or aspiring entertainers who had died suddenly, vanished without explanation, or left behind cryptic warnings. Each case involved a history of feeling watched, mentions of a black SUV or unknown men, missing or stolen personal items after their deaths, police dismissing the case as accidental or unrelated. 7 women. 7 stories. All swept under the rug. And Isabella's voicemail was the only surviving voice that caught through the silence. The family's battle. Isabella's parents refused to let their daughter's story die. They launched a foundation in her name, demanding an independent inquiry. They funded billboards with her final words. This wasn't an accident. But instead of answers, they faced intimidation. Anonymous calls. Strange cars outside their home. A break-in where nothing was taken except their family computer. Her father told a reporter, "It feels like we're fighting shadows. Every time we get close to something, it disappears." The leaked files. Then, in late 2020, something remarkable happened. A hacker group leaked what they claimed were internal emails from one of the powerful agencies Isabella had worked with. Among the files was a chilling message. "Contain reins before press escalates. Diary compromised. Move quickly." The email was dated October 13th, the day after Isabella's death. If genuine, this was the smoking gun. Proof she had been silenced. But just like every other piece of evidence, the files vanished within hours. Websites hosting them were taken down. Social media accounts sharing them were banned. The boyfriend's collapse. By now, Isabella's boyfriend was spiraling. He had lost his partner, his sense of safety, and now felt like the entire world was against him. Friends described him as paranoid, triple-checking locks, refusing to walk alone, whispering during conversations. And then, he too vanished. One night, he simply didn't come home. His apartment was left unlocked, his phone on the counter. No signs of a struggle. No note. Nothing. To this day, he has never been found. Some believe he was silenced. Others think he went underground, hiding from the same people who took Isabella. The global network. By now, it was impossible to ignore. This wasn't about one stalker, or even one death. Isabella's story had peeled back a corner of something far bigger, a global network operating in the shadows of fame and glamour. Models. Actresses. Whistleblowers. Anyone who saw too much, anyone who spoke too loudly, ended up gone. And those who remained silent, they thrived. Their careers flourished. Their faces covered magazines. And they never, ever spoke of Isabella again. The haunting question. At this point, one question burned brighter than the rest. If Isabella knew she was being hunted, if she had written the names, made the connections, and even left behind that chilling voicemail, why didn't anyone save her? Was it because nobody could? Or because nobody wanted to? The ones who tried to speak. A whistle in the dark. 2 years after Isabella's death, whispers of her story still echoed in corners of the internet. Most people dismissed it as conspiracy. But there were some, very few, who risked everything to push it into the light. One of them was investigative journalist Clara Hughes. She was young, ambitious, and had made her career digging into corruption at the highest levels. When she came across Isabella's case, she said she felt something was wrong the second I heard that voicemail. Clara began pulling records, flight logs, agency rosters, financial ties between modeling firms and powerful investors. What she found was staggering. Isabella's name appeared alongside several other women who had died mysteriously. But even more disturbing, those same women were all linked to the same 5 men. Wealthy businessmen. Untouchable. All with spotless reputations. And suddenly, Clara wasn't just investigating Isabella. She was investigating a syndicate hiding in plain sight. The shadow warning. But then came the warning. 3 nights after publishing a teaser article online, nothing too incriminating, just a broad hint, Clara got a call from a blocked number. She later described the voice, calm, measured, almost robotic. "You're walking the same road Isabella did. You know how it ends." The line went dead. The next morning, Clara's car was found torched outside her apartment. She was shaken, but not broken. And that's when she decided to do something Isabella never had the chance to do. She went public, immediately. The broadcast. Clara appeared on a live stream, watched by hundreds of thousands. With shaking hands, she laid out her evidence, connections between powerful agencies, missing women, hidden payments, and leaked names. Her message was clear. If Isabella Raines was silenced, it's because she uncovered something too big to ignore. And I'm not staying silent. For a moment, the world listened. Her story trended across social media. Isabella's voicemail resurfaced, spreading further than ever before. The walls of silence were cracking. But then, just as quickly, it vanished. Within 24 hours, Clara's accounts were banned. Her website was wiped. News outlets that had reported on the story deleted their articles without explanation. And Clara herself? She disappeared from public view. Her last known sighting was in a hotel lobby in Berlin. She never checked out. The survivor's testimony. Around this same time, a woman came forward who claimed she had barely escaped the same network Isabella had tried to expose. She was a model too, using the alias Elena. In a trembling voice, she described exclusive parties hosted in luxury villas, where young women were brought in under the promise of contracts. But once there, they were stripped of their freedom. Phones confiscated. Guards outside. And those who resisted were never seen again. Elena escaped one night by crawling out of a bathroom window. She claimed Isabella had been at one of these gatherings just weeks before her death. She knew. She saw too much. That's why she's gone. Elena's testimony should have blown the case wide open. Instead, mainstream outlets dismissed her as delusional, chasing fame. But independent investigators found details in her story that matched known villa addresses, guest lists, and even security footage from private airports. She wasn't lying. The haunting parallels. By now, the pattern was undeniable. Isabella's case wasn't just a tragedy, it was a blueprint. Every time someone tried to break free or tell the truth, the same cycle repeated: intimidation, erasure, disappearance. Isabella left a voicemail. Daniel Cross vanished. Amelia Keene disappeared. Camille Durand overdosed. Clara Hughes burned out of existence. Elena survived, but lived in hiding. And at the center of it all, names written in Isabella's diary. Names no one had ever spoken aloud. The most chilling revelation. Just when it seemed the trail was cold, a piece of Isabella's diary resurfaced in the strangest way. A former police officer, who claimed he had secretly copied pages from her confiscated belongings, released a single scanned entry. In it, Isabella had written, "They told me if I didn't play along, they'd erase me. If I disappear, no, it wasn't my choice. The world should know who they are." And below, half scribbled in hurried handwriting, were 3 initials. But the file ended there. The officer refused to release the rest, claiming his life would be at risk. The unanswered questions. Now, the mystery has only grown larger. Who were the men Isabella wrote about? Why have every attempt at exposing them been shut down? And most importantly, how many more lives were taken that we'll never know about? Because Isabella's story may not be an ending. It might have been the beginning of a much bigger nightmare. The last echo. The silence that screams. It's been years since Isabella Raines left that voicemail. The world has changed. New scandals have surfaced. New names dominate headlines. But for those who knew her, and for those who followed her story, the silence around her death feels louder than ever. Because Isabella's case was never solved. Her diary was never released. Her killer, if there was one, was never named. And yet, her voice still echoes. That trembling, terrified voice on the voicemail. This wasn't an accident. It is the one piece of truth they could never erase. A legacy of shadows. Her parents continue their fight. They speak at rallies, fund investigations, and beg for justice. Every year, on the anniversary of her death, they release white balloons into the sky with one message written on each: "We hear you, Isabella." But they live with the crushing reality that their daughter is gone, and the people who may have taken her are still free. The vanishing trail. Clara Hughes, the journalist, never resurfaced. The boyfriend was never found. Elena, the survivor, remains in hiding, changing locations every few months, terrified the same men will track her down. And as for the names in Isabella's diary, no one dares to say them aloud. Not on the record. Not publicly. Because everyone who has tried has either vanished or been silenced. The darkest possibility. Here's the part that chills me the most. What if Isabella's voicemail wasn't just a cry for help? What if it was meant to outlive her? What if she knew she wouldn't make it out alive, and wanted to leave behind proof, even if just a fragment, that the world could never bury? Her last words weren't random. They were intentional. A warning. And if that's true, then we're left with the most terrifying possibility of all. That Isabella didn't just die to silence her. She died to warn us. The unseen hand. Think about it. Every attempt to expose this story, erased. Every witness, disappeared. Every shred of evidence, buried. It suggests a power so vast, so untouchable, that it thrives in silence. And yet, the only reason we know Isabella's story at all is because of one accident. A voicemail that was never supposed to exist. A voicemail that slipped through the cracks. A voicemail that refuses to die. So now, it's up to us. To keep asking questions. To not look away when the pieces don't add up. To not let Isabella Raines become just another forgotten headline. Because her last words weren't just for the police. They were for us. Backhand index pointing right if this story shook you, if Isabella's voice still echoes in your head like it does in mine, share it. Tell someone. Don't let the silence win. Always. The last echo. As the years pass, more mysteries pile up. More unexplained deaths. More silences. And though the faces may change, the pattern remains the same. But Isabella's story is different. Because she left us her final echo. Her voice, trembling but defiant, whispering from the grave. This wasn't an accident. And maybe, that echo is enough to keep the shadows awake at night. Enough to remind them that the truth, no matter how hard they try to bury it, has a way of clawing itself back to the surface. Even if it starts with just one voice.